the Washington Post broke the story in the 70s. They had obtained some of these documents after Freedom of Information Act came forward. And then the most recent study, Bass, OSAP, that we could talk about, they also really focused on the Northern Tier cases, and they looked up some of those guys. They found some of the nuclear missile officers and security personnel and interviewed them, and they told the story all over again. There's a guy named Robert Hastings, UFOs and nukes. Has been his specialty for the last 30 years. He wrote a book, made a film. It's chilling. Part of what has happened is it not only happened to us, the U.S., but in Russia. So once I got UFO fever and became a UFO reporter, I traveled all over the world, and one of the places I went twice was Russia. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it occurred to me that maybe we might be able to learn more from the Russians about what our government knows about UFOs than our government will ever tell us. And I met a Russian physicist who was here in the U.S. to lecture on disarmament issues at national labs. He was getting ready to go back to Russia. He had been the national security advisor to Boris Yeltsin. He was the national security advisor to the Russian parliament. He had taught Russian cosmonauts how to spot American nuclear submarines from space. He was connected. So I had a beer with him at the suggestion of a U.S. congressman. And I said, hey, Nikolai, you ever hear any of your guys in Russia at high levels talk about UFOs? No, can't really think that doesn't ring a bell. We have another beer, and he says, I do have a guy at the KGB who told me that they had looked into it for a while. And I thought, well, the KGB had just released its Oswald files. I thought maybe this is a golden opportunity to find out what they know. Because they are a superpower, they have nuclear weapons, they would have seen the same things we've been seeing. So I went to Russia. We sent Nikolai over back to Moscow, gave him a stipend, and his instructions were find people who are in a position to know, high up in the military or the government, who have never talked about this before. And it took about 8 months for him to report back and get all these people lined up. And then I went to Russia and met him and interviewed him. And these were former military guys. There was a guy named Colonel Boris Sokolov who was a gold mine of information. He told us about a previously unknown study, probably the biggest UFO study in the history of the world. For 10 years, from 78 to 88, the Russian military empire, every military unit in Russia, in their whole military, global, if they saw any ball of light, anomalous aircraft, UFO, anything weird like that, they had to report it to the KGB, and then all that information went to one desk at the Ministry of Defense. Colonel Sokolov was that desk, and they had thousands of reports that had never been made public before. He told me about 45 different incidents where Russian warplanes had chased UFOs, couldn't catch them. 3 of the instances, these UFOs shot them down. 2 of those pilots died, and after that, he said, the order went out, look, if you see these things, don't mess with them. He said their study was for a very practical reason. These craft could do things that the Russians could not, and they wanted to get an advantage over the Americans in terms of stealth technology. So they wanted to do what people in reverse engineering programs are doing, figure out how the UFOs work so they could have an advantage over us. I had to smuggle some of these documents back. If I had been caught with this stuff, because some of it was classified, if I'd been caught, I'd still be in a gulag somewhere. But I got it back. I shared it with some people. It eventually found its way into the U.S. government's hands. And it tells us basically a lot of what we now know about our own government, that they have always taken this seriously. And one of the incidents, I'm sorry I made the long way around on that story, was an ICBM base in the Ukraine. Colonel Sokolov says that a giant UFO appeared over this base. These are missiles that are trained to go to New York and Los Angeles. They're very serious stuff there. It's a very secure facility. Giant UFO appears over this base. It splits into pieces, and then it melds back apart, and it performs this dazzling display for a couple of hours. The base is on high alert, and all of a sudden the nuclear control facilities lights up like a Christmas tree, and whatever this thing was, it entered the launch control codes. The missiles were enabled. They start firing up. They're ready to go. And then poof, UFO goes away. The whole thing shuts down. It goes back to normal. Colonel Sokolov said he and his team sent there to investigate it. They took the machines apart, could not figure out what it had done. And he told me on camera, we think that they were sending us a message that these are your most powerful weapons, but we're not impressed. Same kind of thing happened here. We don't like to admit it, but there's a pretty strong paper trail that it really did happen. Now, what is a bigger national security issue than that? Or like the Tic Tac. You got a nuclear-powered carrier there and other warships around it, and you got these strange radar sightings for a couple of weeks right off the coast of the U.S. This is an intruder. And even though these aliens, whatever they are not firing beams and wiping out our cities, you have to consider it a threat. That's the job of our Defense Department. They don't know what it is, but they know it shouldn't be there, and it's not ours. And I think that's what the program is going on right now. It's a legitimate national security issue. It deserves to be investigated in spite of the larger social implications that we're not alone.
The TikTok craft or Tic Tac craft, goddamn TikTok.
TikTok.
Can't get away from that word. The Tic Tac craft that was spotted off San Diego, it performed something spectacular in terms of its ability to go from the surface of the water to 60,000 feet in how long?
So less than a second, but there's actually more to it. There was a craft. Remember, I was talking with Commander Fravor before this was public.
Yeah.
There was a craft under the water, too. The Tic Tac would drop from 60,000 feet is what they're saying, 60 to 80. But that's the scan volume of the Spy 1 radar. So everybody I've talked with said they were coming from above. They were coming from outer space, dropping down within a second and stopping on a dime and then making the movements Commander Fravor saw, like inside of a glass. Then he said to me in our first talk ever, I'll never forget this, because I'm talking to a fighter pilot and I got to talk fighter pilot, and I don't, and he says to me, it noticed me. And I go, what do you mean it noticed you? And he says, as I was descending rapidly to engage it, it turned its nose and began to intelligently mirror my movements, came right up by me, and he says, faster than you can see, you can't even see a bullet leave a gun. No, it just, bam, shot off. He goes, we don't have anything like that. I wish we did. We don't. Whatever propels that is not a reactionary propulsion system.
Meaning it's not pushing something off the back to get it to go forward.
Like everything else.
Like fire and explosions.
It's a field propulsion. Yeah, like anything else we know, you got to have something going back to go forward. Rockets, we're still using the same ones from back in the day. This thing instantaneously, without effects of inertia, can move. Now, and that distortion, that's exactly how Bob described these things would work or do work in his opinion. So Commander Fravor got to see it. Now, and these incursions, by the way, look, there's stuff George reports on. There's a lot he doesn't. As a filmmaker myself, people tell me stories all the time. These incursions, it's not a rarity. These are happening to this day. I just heard about one in Guam. Incursions over high security airspace over our weapons systems. And in Guam, there was just recently an incursion. The Pantex facility with the igloos where we hold our nuclear weapons and stuff like that, there are incursions over these. So to George's point, the reason why maybe all of this is secret is not because we can't handle it, people flip out. Maybe we just want to make sure we fucking get this tech first because it's a game changer.
Now, let's talk about the people that have tried to debunk this and why they're off. Because they've made some debunking claims about some of these videos and about the technology that was used to track these things. That's incorrect. Where they don't really understand what they're debunking.
Right.
So please explain that, because that's one of the things that people are immediately going to go to. They're going to go, well, Mick West has already debunked it. And I've read the stuff that he says. It's mental gymnastics to try to explain it the way he's explaining it without recognition of the fact that these things were actively blocking radar. These things were actively blocking tracking systems. These were physical crafts. This is not like a bird.
No.
Or so, like a lot of the wacky theories that he has are like, I wonder, it's real weird, like that a smart man can make such really bizarre conclusions. Very weird. Almost like someone wants him to do those.
Sure. I mean, look, it's so exciting that we're seeing something and the government's saying, okay, these are UFOs. We have not identified them. They have propulsion techniques that we don't have. And we're just talking about the videos.
Let's talk about the debunking, though.
Okay.
Talk about the debunking and what his claims are in the debunking.
Okay, so one that I recently attacked because it was so ridiculous is he was saying that the Go Fast video, which is this object that goes along in a straight line, one of the 3 videos that was released, he said what was probably a bird. That was his first theory.
Let's pull up the Go Fast video.
Yeah, I mean, I recently went deep into talking with Boeing experts who work on these FLIR pods. They're telling me how they work, what they can capture, why.
Explain what a FLIR pod is.
A forward-looking infrared. So basically, on fighter planes, you have a camera.
So here's the video. We're pulling it up right here.
Sure, that's mounted, and it's essentially recording in thermal imagery. These things are. This is not Instagram. These things are weapons systems that are highly trained to be able to accurately represent spatial awareness and to be able to target, enemy combatants. This is not an iPhone, an Instagram. These are weapons for us. So out of the 3 videos, if we just look at this one, although I like the Tic Tac one with Commander Fravor and I like the gimbal one, those are awesome. This one gives us very little information. But the idea that this would be a bird, if you talk to anybody that uses these pods, you can't pinpoint on a bird. You can't lock a weapon system on a frickin' bird.
Well, look how fast it's going, too.
Well, here's what's so interesting is everybody can debate speed.
So this is where it's locked in on it.
Right.
So the weapon system is locked in on this thing, and it's tracking it now.
Right. And they got real excited when they locked it because they said boxed a moving target, right? So here's the deal, though. Out of anything I could say about this video, because there's not a lot of information in there, what I can say is that object you're seeing is colder than the surface of the ocean. Now, I looked up the surface of the ocean temperature at that location at that time because we had the information. It was like 65 degrees. What propulsion system? So a bird. A bird is about 100 and let's say 5 degrees, like a seagull. Seagulls can go maybe 15 miles an hour. I don't know how fast they can go. But they wouldn't be colder than the ocean. They'd be hypothermic and dead. It cannot be a bird because what we're seeing is a colder object than the surface of the water. That's why you're seeing it white.
And how fast is it going?
That's under debate. There's different
interpretations.
Yeah. So I'll give you one interpretation about 240 miles an hour. Some people say, and then they can argue, well, the fastest bird in a nosedive could go that fast. So back up. We have an object that is colder than the surface of the ocean. That immediately gets rid of the bird theory because a bird would be hypothermic and drop like a paperweight into the water. It cannot fly at that. So that's the piece of information I would attack that debunking with.
But this video, when you're watching that, if it is going 200 miles an hour, that's not outside of what's possible with spacecraft or aircraft or just planes.
Right, but it's cold.
I understand that.
That's pretty cool.
But it's very interesting. But it's not moving anywhere near as fast as the Tic Tac.
No. This is just something, because this is part, and George can tell you, this was part of a much bigger series of events. So like the gimbal craft itself, that's another debunking thing. They said it's a plane banking away and you're seeing it through thermal. First of all, talk with the pilot. Not fucking so.
This is the gimbal.
Yeah, the gimbal.
He's pulling it up right now. And how fast is this thing supposed to be going?
The speed, from what I recall, wasn't registered on the radar. It's not that it's going fast. If you talk with the pilots, it was rotating. It was spinning like a top, and for like 11 hours without refueling. I mean, the thing was just sitting out there. This is an occurrence that happened over a course of many, many weeks. Now, when it rotates like that, the debunking theory is that you're seeing a plane bank. So as if our military doesn't know what another plane is. Other planes look very different when you see them through thermal. This thing was self-rotating, and I just did an interview.
And how fast is this, or rather, how warm is this thing supposed to be? Is this supposed to actually be hot?
I am unaware of...
Because you're looking at it through thermal, right?
Yeah, I'm unaware of the specifics of that one when it comes to heat. All I know is that it is self-actuating. It is not something that is a glare or flare of a heat signature, making it look like it's turning. The actual craft is self-actuating.
And what is that halo around it?
That's just an artifact of the FLIR thermal. It's not.
But the premise that the U.S. government would tell you all right, look, we're going to release these videos reluctantly. Lou Elizondo is the guy that got them released, and then the U.S. government formally released them a couple of months ago. The idea that the U.S. government would release it, the Pentagon says these are unidentified. If it was a bird or a jet engine, the pilots would not have the kind of reaction that they had that you can hear on the audio.
Yeah.
Our government does not tell members of Congress. The Pentagon doesn't go to the Senate Intelligence Committee, show them those videos and say, it's unidentified if it isn't. And, the reaction of the pilots, the fact that they were forced to release it to begin with, suggests there really is unidentified.
Why do you think they've addressed it? Why do you think that they have addressed the fact they're studying these things? Why not just continue denying it?
I think they were forced to. And some props to Tom DeLonge. I know you guys had a pretty spirited conversation when he was here, but he created an organization. Lou Elizondo, who ran that program, came forward and brought with him those videos. I saw them 2 days after Lou Elizondo stepped on a stage with Tom and said, I was in charge of the program. He and Chris Mellon have been sort of the engineers of getting that story into the New York Times. That changed everything. As I said, the last 2.5 years, everything has turned on its head. The New York Times covers the story. The result is other media covered as well. They've been ignoring it forever, and that allowed people who keep these secrets. That pressure meant that people in Congress started asking questions. 2 days after the story came out, I interviewed Senator Harry Reid, who was the one who got the money to create that program that became ATIP. And he said his phone had been ringing off the hook from other members of Congress who are now suddenly interested. I didn't know there was a program, they're telling him. How do we learn more about this? It started a series of closed-door briefings on Capitol Hill that continue to this day. The pilots, like Dave Fravor, were hauled before Congress, first in front of the staff of the Senate Intelligence and then Senate Armed Services, and then the elected members, these senators who get briefed on it, and they were impressed, and they wanted more pilots to come in. So it's been going on for 2.5 years, and 2 weeks ago, about a month ago now, the culmination of it, Senator Marco Rubio, who is now the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, drops this bill. And it's the budget for the intelligence budget for the next year. And he includes a UFO provision in there. Congress wants to have a mechanism set up where we get regular briefings from the Pentagon on UFOs. That's an astonishing change of events. It's because of the media pressure and then congressional interest. It made it more acceptable for everybody to pursue the subject matter. It's kind of out of the shadows. And the Pentagon has reacted in fits and starts. So sometimes, as they said to the New York Times, that program ended. Had nothing to do with UFOs. At first they said it did, then they said it didn't. They've admitted Lou Elizondo worked on the program, then they said he didn't. They've said that the OSAP, which is the other program, the mother program that became ATIP, that had nothing to do with UFOs, but it did. So they continue to sort of lie and obfuscate and muddy the waters. But the fact is that there's too much momentum from media and Congress and the public to hide this anymore.
You should tell Joe about how the government program OSAP was created directly because George wrote this book about a little place called Skinwalker Ranch where the government was studying this property. That happened because of his book. Some DIA guys. Well, you should tell the story of
I visited that place.
Yeah, but right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you got I think you got a little misled on it.
Tell him how the government study.
Reporter gets threatened and
Yeah,
now things just kind of get out.
So I've thought about this. Like, I'm going back to Brazil, and I thought, I'm obviously going after, additional eyewitness testimony. I'm going after the photographic stuff. And those of you out there that are like tired of hearing about it, well, I spent 20 plus years in search of the photograph that I featured just now. That one with the background story on it, provenance, that sort of thing.
Jamie, go look at the one that I sent you. It's a better version of it.
Yeah, and so it's not like I just because you can't, after a year or two, haven't successfully obtained stuff.
So this is a better version.
Yeah, it's a better version that you could see the granular of the film footage.
It's weird. It almost looks like there's something in the back.
It does look a little bit like
a little
that.
propeller or something, like a Jetsons type thing.
But let's just say...
And that thing was silent, supposedly?
Silent. According to the witnesses, it didn't make any sound. It hovered there for an extended period of time. And when it took off straight vertical, like this. Straight up.
Fast?
It started going faster, and then was gone. Yep, that was Craig Lindsay who interviewed the witnesses who told me that. And it's so weird, though. According to Richard Greaves in Scotland, the Americans got involved.
Of course, we get involved in everything.
Yep, they showed up and they intimidated the shit out of the witnesses. And I know people can criticize me for reporting on these alleged men in black, but it's not me saying it. It's the witnesses that are saying it. And I did it full bore for the first time in Moment of Contact, because I remember hearing these stories for decades, and I finally was like, everyone's going to think I'm crazy if I report on this. But this lady, who was the mother of the two daughters that had these visits and the intimidation, and I was like, screw it, I'm just going to report on this, and I'll just take the criticism, And then I wasn't expecting this to be the case with this photograph, but lo and behold, it was. But anyway, it's a huge story. In my opinion, they can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's coming out, and it's drip, drip, drip. But I have to remind your audience, people that are feeling impatient, that we've had 3 open congressional hearings in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
We hadn't had any in over 50 years prior to that.
It's definitely, even though it's still difficult to get information and figure out what's actually going on, there's way more open mainstream discussion of it. Way more.
And it's frustrating at times. I get it.
Of
People are
course.
like, oh, well, why all these people? Why can't they just say, why can't David Grush just tell us? Well, I can remind people that the DOD has stripped David Grush of his clearances and won't allow him to get into a SCIF. This is one of the things that I talked to this guy, Brian Benner, who appears in the movie at Politico, and he goes, if Congress finds out about it, one thing we know on the Hill is that you're going to find out about it. They can't keep a secret. It's going to leak. So they've been doing everything they can, I imagine it's the DOD, to prevent Grush from going into a SCIF with members of Congress to release and reveal the classified details necessary to verify his claims, okay?
Have you been
if it
keeping
wasn't-
this under wraps for 60 plus years or whatever they've been doing?
Yeah.
Would you really tell AOC? Would you really pull her aside and tell her?
Well, I mean, any members of Congress with the proper clearances and feel like they want to have that information. I mean, you got
Nothing
Mace-
wrong with her.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
even saying
yeah.
her. I'm just saying, let's pick a young one.
Well,
you're going to
wouldn't-
give them all that information.
Exactly. They don't want them to have that information.
Right.
There's no question about it. I mean,
That's what I would imagine. That's probably why they won't let Grush get into a SCIF.
So here's another thing I'd like to mention is that David Grush claims that he gave even a street address to the ICIG, which is Thomas Monheim. That's the Intelligence Community Inspector General. So I'm asking members of Congress to support all their efforts. Burchett, who's been amazing, regardless of what your politics, the guy's phenomenon. He's been really pushing for transparency. He's a super solid guy. You got Mace, you got Muskowski, what's this, from Florida, Garcia from California, AOC, New York, Luna, and then, of course, you got the Senate side. You got Rubio, who I totally knows where this stuff is, Rounds, Schumer. And if you look at the NDAA, you can see the language in plain sight. I mean, it's phenomenal what's going on, and I think that our elected officials that are really pushing for transparency need to hear from us, need to hear from the citizens, and know that we support their efforts and that we have their backs, and continuing to push for transparency, to push to find out what the hell's going on. I mean, imagine if it's true. Imagine if we have spaceships and we have biologics, bodies. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is not just implications for the United States. That's global implications. I mean, the impacts, the ripple effect that would have around the world for that confirmation to happen.
No doubt.
It would be huge.
Well, the human race deserves to know. It shouldn't be unelected officials and Defense Department people that know about this stuff. That's crazy.
I totally agree.
Unless this is what I had a conversation with Ryan Graves yesterday. The way I would argue it, if I was a military person, I would say this is a national security interest. And we are trying to back engineer this stuff. We're not successful. If China steals our data, if Russia can back engineer one before, if Iran gets one before us, we're fucked. Because these things are insanely sophisticated.
We would obviously weaponize the technology. That's obvious.
Of course.
Yeah, duh.
Duh.
It's like 101,
yeah,
right?
Why would we not?
The basics. I mean, if you could put a nuke on one of those things, I mean, the exhibited technology that people that have witnessed this stuff say it goes from a standstill to out of sight in the blink of an eye. I mean, these objects, what was it? David Fravor said it went from space
50,000 feet above sea level to 50
sea level
in 1 second.
in 1 second.
Yeah.
That's
It's
insane.
We talked about it yesterday. Like,
You did, yeah.
It's insane amount of speed. And the way Ryan explained it in terms of like the amount of force you would need is equivalent to how many nuclear bombs did he say? Something insane. Like the entire nuclear arsenal has to be to generate that kind of power. Whatever it is, it's if these stories are true, it's doing something that we don't understand. So if it's ours, I kind of get why they wouldn't want to spill the beans. My thought once was, what if this is not weaponizable with our current technology? Like, what if these things are our drones, but they don't know how to put a weapon on it yet? Like, because whatever you do,
I have a problem with that.
at a speed.
I have a problem with that theory, and the problem I have is that the United States government has documented close encounters of the third kind. That's beings connected.
Right.
That's their own files, right? That's not me saying it.
Right.
So it's not just these objects exhibiting revolutionary technology for at least 80 years, right? No wings, no tail, no visible means of propulsion, ability to hover, accelerate, out of sight in the blink of an eye, right angle turns at high speed, no wake, no sonic boom, that kind of stuff. But you also have reports, credible reports of beings connected to some of the craft. And that's documented all around the world. So that eliminates, right?
If it's true. See, but this is the whole thing. Like, just because something's written down somewhere doesn't mean that someone didn't write it down as a psyop. Someone did write it down to discredit other people with a ridiculous story. One way to discredit a credible story is to attach it to a bunch of ridiculous stories, right? So if I was going to hide some sort of technology, one thing I would do is connect it to a bunch of kooky stuff, a bunch of psychic stuff and remote viewing, just a bunch of things that people like very easily dismiss. UFO abductions, UFO encounters with an actual being. Right, but put a bunch of stuff in there that like makes people go, "What? Is this real?" And just enough so that you can hide the real stuff in there.
Well, I think
and again, I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, I totally hear you. And again, I've said this earlier in the show, and I'll say it again, is like the reason why I believe David Grush, who testified, not just because
I believe David, but David doesn't have firsthand experience that he's talked about.
But the reason, I know, but the reason why I believe him is because it aligns with my research in the field. Remember, I spent over 12 years investigating on and off with my buddy Marco Leal in Varginha, Brazil, that UFO crash case, and only found out last minute, the last time I was there, that the Americans were involved. So I was like, oh my God, the rumors are true. Like, the Americans really are. Do you see, like, I've obviously looked into Roswell for years. I went to Roswell the 50th anniversary.
This is how the deal works, bro. You want the aid? We get the UFOs. We give you the aid, but if it crash UFO, you fucking call us. Yeah. Stay out of there. Don't be carrying that dude to the hospital. Leave it to us, and then we'll just scoop that up and shut the fuck up. What do you think about that? One of the craziest stories is that there's a building somewhere that's an enormous building that was actually built around the UFO because the UFO was too big to move. Have you heard this story?
It was reported on News Nation with Ross Coulthart.
It's got to be real.
And Ross Coulthart is a credible.
He seems legit. He's got an accent.
He's got a great accent.
He's got an Australian accent.
That's not quite British.
We believe you if you have an accent.
But it's close.
You're more credible than a New York accent.
There's something about a British accent that just adds credibility to anything.
It was some guy from New York. So we got this fucking car.
Rightfully sorry, mate.
We put it over here.
It's absolutely huge.
Yeah. This spaceship's so fucking big. We gotta build a building around it.
But they talked about it. Now here's
what is this building, and where is it supposed to be?
I don't know.
You're holding it back.
No,
you
I really don't know.
This?
Nope. I have a little bit, but I don't have the same connections on that. But I'll tell you a case that I do think needs to get looked into.
Oh, you're gonna move us around? Away from this.
Because this is one that but this is a craft, a recovered craft.
He's a government agent. This guy.
So
he's trying to.
So there's a memo in the program that was through the DOPSR process was released. Unfortunately, some of the names are redacted. Christopher Mellon obtained it. It was from correspondence he had with a high-level government official back in 2020. It just got approved for release. I don't know, maybe a year ago. It's featured in the doc, and in it has the names of not just the gatekeeper, but other people names who found the gatekeeper to the crash retrieval program. I'm told that unredacted versions of that have been handed to select members of Congress and people that are investigated in an official capacity for the government. But in it, they specifically mention a case, not crash, a landed case that happened in 1953 at Kingman, Arizona. So I made some inquiries with aerospace folks that I've been meeting with quietly, and I'm like, "What's this case that you guys keep talking about with the king in Arizona?" They're like, "Oh, it was like they just landed and left." I was like, "Well, how do you know they land? What do you mean landed and left?" And they're like, "Well, the doors were open and nobody home, and they walked off." I said, "You mean somebody just flew this thing down? It landed on the ground in the desert in Kingman, Arizona, in 1953, and they left the doors open and left?" And they were like, "Yep, that's pretty much what happened." So
they left the craft there.
somebody they flew it down and left a craft on the ground. I was told that, and I wouldn't be repeating this if I didn't think there was some serious credibility to it. But apparently, it was. And
Well, doesn't that align with how Diana Pasulka and Gary Nolan have started describing these things as donations?
well, the individual that I talked to was so funny because this individual was like, "Not a scratch," and I go, "Not a scratch? What? Not a scratch? Not a scratch on the." No, it was perfect. Didn't have a scratch. I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like somebody who's more than just heard about this. But one of the aspects of it didn't have a scratch on it. So I think that's a case that I think that people should definitely
the
be looking into.
first-hand witness said it didn't have a scratch?
I don't know if it was the way they described
This
it.
is the problem. This is the problem I have with all this stuff.
But here's the thing.
If you were
Totally-
Travis Walton,
Yes,
okay,
love that guy.
I love that guy too.
Fascinating story.
I really enjoy. We got a bobblehead. That's a Travis Walton bobblehead.
Oh, no way.
Oh, yes,
oh my
way.
gosh.
I got it from Travis. That's him staring at the sky
Oh my gosh.
when he was a young man.
I went to the location at a remote spot.
I'm interested in that because that's a first-hand witness.
Yes.
Right. That's a guy.
Yes.
He's explaining his bizarre experience. He's
Yep.
told the same story.
No question.
For whatever, 50, 60
Forever.
years, whatever the hell it's been.
1975.
Whatever
or
it was
something.
since he got abducted, almost 50 years. So this guy was there. That was his story.
Yep.
I'm interested in that. When I hear a guy told a guy that this is what happened and this is how he
Totally.
described it, I'm like,
Super frustrating.
So talking to Jay Sands.
Yes, first-hander.
Again, first-hand was like, what the fuck are you
Yeah,
saying?
face-to-face, yes.
Tell me what it was doing. What did it look like?
Yeah,
He
that's
said
nuts.
he thought it was an adolescent, too. He didn't think that it was a full-grown one. He thought it was young.
Well, he's got an illustration of it in the documentary, and I tell you, it's one of the crazy. I remember after
Can you
hearing
imagine?
I know. I was like, if this is true, I was like, this is crazy.
Could you
Face
imagine
to face, I said,
being
how
that
close were you?
person?
Now, this is something that we didn't reveal in the documentary. It was really funny. He thought that this individual was suffering from frostbite or what's that when you get really cold?
Hypothermia. Yeah.
Skin had a blue tint to it. So he took his jacket off and he very insistently put the jacket on this individual because he was thinking this person's really, really cold. It's been out in the desert, probably had a plane crash or whatever.
Right.
And so he's putting his jacket, and the person was kind of resistant, but Jason said, I insisted. I took one layer of my jacket and I put around this individual, and that individual left with the jacket on. So I jokingly say, where do you think your jacket is now?
Wow.
He's like, probably out there at El Zatari or God only knows.
Or right here.
Yeah. Yeah, or
This is the thing that gets
Or
me
right here.
logistically.
Yes.
Okay, if these things are coming from the ocean, just logistically,
I started, interviewing pilots, flag officers, general officer equivalent type Navy folks, and they were seeing some really crazy shit. And like a event that I talked about previously publicly in a YouTube video on the Yes Theory channel. There was this one 30-year senior Navy officer that he was going to work sober, no predisposition for fantasy, all that kind of stuff, because I interviewed the individual for a couple hours, and he saw this crazy triangle hover over his car going to work at a certain naval facility, and it blew his mind. He was serious. The paint on his car turned milky white after the incident. So to me, that sounds like ionizing radiation. So like ultraviolet, just like how your headlights get all foggy over time if you park your car out in the sun. Same phenomenon just happened, within 24-hour period. And I'm like, whoa, if this is true, and the oral testimony and, crazy radar data that I saw when I was on the task force, stuff making turns that didn't make any sense. Well, holy shit, what is this stuff then?
this anomaly with his paint is this documented? Is this photographs or?
Yes, I saw photographs. It was documented. Yeah.
And what is there a conventional explanation?
I mean, based on what he described, something to rapidly ionize his paint like that within a day. I can't think of anything off the top of my head in terms of some conventional aerospace technology. And this was a certain facility in the continental U.S. This was not overseas. So it's not like our adversaries flying some spooky thing in U.S. airspace.
So this thing hovered over his car for how long?
Couple minutes while he was traveling at about 60 miles an hour. So it was pacing.
How
his
far
vehicle.
away from his vehicle?
It's probably a couple hundred feet in altitude. It was less than 1,000 feet, which is
Really?
also bad because from an airspace perspective, pilots would know this. Anything under 1,000 feet? No. Unless you get special clearance, and you only do that over controlled airspace, like a military test ranges, right?
Right.
People fly low and that kind of thing.
So is he on, what kind of a highway is he on?
A conventional civilian highway.
Civilian highway. So anyone could have been on it.
Yes.
It just happened to be this guy. Did he have any other experiences with this thing?
No, this was like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. He kept it to himself for a couple years, but then he, the task force
what was
came
his
out.
name?
I don't. What he's
Okay.
That individual's still on.
Let's
active
call him
duty.
Bob.
Yeah.
But did anybody say to him, "Hey Bob, what the fuck happened to your car"?
That's a good question. I don't remember if people asked him about his car. So he took
that's-
pride in his car. So it actually was probably more upsetting to him personally.
What kind of
'cause
car was it?
It was like a Toyota or something. So
Okay.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, his Toyota's fucked. So
Yeah.
Okay. And so did he have to report this? Is this something that?
He did not report it, to my knowledge, to anybody. It wasn't until he reported it to us about 5 years later that it happened.
So are these kind of experiences something that a lot of these pilots are embarrassed about discussing or have apprehension about discussing because they could be ridiculed?
Yeah, a lot of people that are on flight status, they don't want to be sent to the psych, right? There's a whole aerospace physiology kind of empire in the military. If you're an operator or a guy, a missile key turner, you're on what they call a personal reliability program. If you're taking Tylenol, you got to report it. If you have a fever, you got to report it because you're in control of nuclear weapons when you're on duty. So
Right.
yeah.
And so this idea of being predisposed to fantasy, that's also something that they sort of talk to these people about or try to get a gauge of.
Yeah. These are people that are very sober-minded. I mean, this individual was early in the morning, going to work, not under the influence of anything, and that person had a similar clearance as mine, TSSCI. So we've gone through
TS, what's that?
top secret, Sensitive Department of Information clearance, and just like myself, I've been through multiple polygraphs in my career. So did this individual. So.
Does he have any
yeah.
idea or any theories about why this thing was following him?
No, that's what freaked him out the most because he didn't have any experience in his life like this. It totally blew his mind when he looked out his moonroof and then looked out the side of his car door and saw this 300-foot triangle. It was like pre-dawn sky, but it was darker than the pre-dawn sky, and it had this plasma edges, it was purplish glowing edges, and these three lights that had these omnidirectional, almost like pool lights. How you can't really tell where the light source is, and it was totally trippy. And that's just one example of many anecdotal, with some evidence, pilot stories. And that's what made me dig deeper, and I started cultivating my network. Has the government studied this before? This wasn't just OSAP and ATIP and Blue Book and all this shit in the past, right? This seems serious. So, certainly the government has looked at this, and, I went to search for that program, and that's what I ended up whistleblowing on, right?
So how did you initially discover this program? And, what was your first encounter with the information?
A very senior individual in the intel community came to me when I guess I was asking a lot of questions because I'm a very inquisitive guy, and it was like, hey, I need to introduce you to somebody. He listed that certain person's academic credentials, which were beyond reproach, PhD level education, clearance, resume was insane. I'm like, well, okay, sure, I'll talk to this person, and I ended up meeting that person in a top secret facility, and he started discussing hey, there's a program. I was on it. And, we were reverse engineering crash material that we've recovered over the decades, and he's like, I'm not joking, we're telling you because you guys have to report to the Deputy Secretary of Defense and Congress on this matter, right? And we were actively briefing like Secretary Esper, Deputy Secretary Norquist, other cabinet level folks, right? And it's like there's an oversight issue because you're the UAP task force. You should be read into this stuff because like why spend the taxpayers dollars looking at stuff that we already have data on?
Right.
So that spooked me, and that was like fall of 2019. And I don't take a guy's word for it. I'm like, you know what? Myself and my trusted colleagues that had a lot of special accesses like me, we cultivated our network, and we ultimately interviewed about 40 people or so, all the way up to multi-star generals, directors of agencies, mid-level guys that literally touched it, worked inside of it, all the stuff. They brought intel reports for me to look at, documents, and a lot of that I could cross-verify with other oral sources that my high-level colleagues or I talked to, and it checked out. Especially when I had enough information on, and I know who specifically to ask. Like, hey, well, I want read into this. Like, I'm on the UAP task force, and we went to those. I'll call them gatekeepers for the lack of a better term, and they basically said, "Fuck you" to me and my colleagues.
So why were these other people willing to discuss this with you?
Well, they determined I didn't need to know. I was already cleared at such a high level, handling presidential material and everything. It's like Dave needs to know. And they felt that coming to us, it was a form of a protected disclosure. They felt that they weren't really violating anything because, we were I'll call it the investigatory body for the Department of Defense and the intelligence community and Congress at the time. And they, you are allowed to, disclose to a government official in an official capacity. And I, did that. And, of course, I protected those people. And I took those people, a lot of them, and I brought them to the intelligence community inspector general when I filed my complaint. Because I don't want people to, hear it from a secondhand source. People call it hearsay, whatever. Though I have some firsthand knowledge, I eventually talk about someday. I'm trying to get it cleared, but through security processes, so they could hear it and hear the details, like who, what, when, where, why, where the shit is, who's in control of it, what are the cover programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's what deemed my complaint credible and urgent in July 2022, which is my complaint, yes, was about reprisal too. I filed that separately eventually to the Department of Defense Inspector General. And that's an ongoing investigation, but it was my congressional oversight UAP crash retrieval allegations that was deemed credible and urgent. It was sent to the Director of National Intelligence, and then it was sent to the Congressional Intelligence Committees around that time, July of 2022. And I eventually went to Congress in December of 2022, and it's a crazy story why it took so long. It's fucking nuts. But I provided total about 11 and a half to 12 hours of classified testimony to the congressional staffers and their lawyers for both the House and the Senate. And I went, full open kimono. I mean, I told them as much as I could within my time slot, if you will.
So this is obviously very compartmentalized,
Yes.
where there's only a few people that know about this information, and they're not allowed to discuss it with other people. Mm-hmm. When did this all start? I mean, is this out of Roswell? Is it predate that? Like, when did they first realize that there are things that cannot be explained or can't be explained through conventional means?
Yeah, I mean, the program goes back a ways. The precise beginning of it, I can't talk about, but I did, because of security stuff, but I did talk about publicly the 1933 retrieval, and I did that tactically and I ran that through the security approval office because I wanted to show that this is much older and it's international. It's not like a U.S. thing. I mean, this stuff is landing or crashing around the world, and unexpected countries have had this happen, and that's why I picked that, because I thought that was a interesting case. And then, of course, Pope Pius XII and the Vatican were involved, back-channeling it through the OSS, which became the CIA later, to FDR, and that's how the U.S. knew something weird happened in Italy right before World War II. But
so this was 33 was the first documented.
That is the earliest one I can talk about. Yeah,
there's something that predates that.
You could infer that.
You could infer that.
Yeah.
So this 33 one you said was in Italy?
Yeah, Magenta. So it's I'm bad at geography. I think that's like a Lombardy region. It's like northwest Italy.
And what's the story behind it?
So basically, it looked like it crashed, right? The original shape most likely was like a lenticular disc-like craft, with like two dinner plates.
What
right?
does lenticular mean?
So like two dinner plates, smushed together, right? The hump, and there's like a bubble on top.
Like the classic, saucer.
Like that.
Like that. Okay.
But it looks like when it hits, the edges broke off, so it became this like bell or acorn shaped thing. And there was nothing in it. It was like just an artifact. There was no biological remnants, if you will. So it's so funny because the Italians were so confused. They actually called up the Germans and they were like, is this one of your Wunderwaffe? Like, what the hell just crashed in northern Italy? Mussolini. And this is all publicly available information because some Italian researchers found all these original documents that some people were sitting on for years in Italy. They put a gag order on the press, etc. And Mussolini asked the Germans to come down. And of course, the Germans came down and they were like, that is not ours, but let's look at it together. So that's kind of perhaps a tertiary reason the kind of Axis powers got together. I'm not saying that's like the reason, but I think the Italians and the Germans were so intrigued with what they found from like an artifact perspective. There was at least some scientific and military collaboration during the war, the details of which I'm not sure of, but I know people that know that specific event that are currently still intel officers within this program in detail. But
so was there witnesses to the crash or some sort of an understanding that something had crash landed and then they discovered it?
Yeah, I forget the precise discovery. I don't know if it was like local police officers or local farmers found it in the field, something like that. I don't want to misspeak. I assume some of the Italian researchers might have some fact witnesses that can orally say, "Oh yeah, my great grandfather found it" or something like that. But I don't remember.
And what was the scale of this vehicle?
It was probably like 20 feet by 10 feet, something like that. Not super huge, but kind of big.
Do they think that this was a drone? Do they think that this was occupied?
There was nothing in it. So if it was piloted, if you will, by some sentience, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. So.
So what happened to that vehicle?
It's a big question. I don't know where to start on that, but here's what I know. I know that there are people in government that want some level of disclosure on whatever this is without defining it. Just there should be oversight. So I know that to be true. There are good people that think that people are running amok and there must be oversight, not just financially, but if these types of technologies actually exist.
Right. Who's in control of them and why? And who has access to them and why?
I mean, we have a history of disinformation and misinformation put out to the public and to Congress by the intelligence community, by the Pentagon. They lie all the time. It's part of the turf. It's part of the job. But for them to then go into closed-door briefings with members of Congress, with the oversight committees who handle their budgets, for them to lie about that, that's another matter. And I don't think they would because they could get busted for it. A lot of stuff is coming out now, and I know we get asked all the time, who's behind this push? It looks like it's one big movement as opposed to a bunch of different things that all happened in approximately the same time. It's kind of been organic, different people have come forward, and it encourages other people to come forward, as opposed to somebody doing a master manipulation of the whole thing.
What resistance is there to this information getting out?
There's resistance on like multiple levels. So despite what you believe to be true or not true, the big question is, are we going to be able to verify some of these claims? That's all I care about, right? If we're back engineering some of these craft, then I believe that we should have the discovery process to find out if things like what David Grush has said under oath, that he has literally put his well-being and his safety on the line for, if that is true, then we have a duty to find out. So the pushback comes from many levels. There's stigma. It's fucking huge, dude. Like it is political toxicity for some of these senators to even, people don't want to know, they don't want me to say I ever talk with them. It's like a toxic environment politically, the UFO thing.
Because everybody thinks it's bullshit, or you're a loon if you believe it. But not everybody, but quite a few people.
Not just that, it doesn't help you get reelected, man.
Right.
And then when you start poking the bear and going into the oversight committees and the Senate Intelligence Committee and the, all these things, they're like, whoa, this is our territory. Why are you, as Congress, pushing on us? Why are you doing that? Like, this is our job. We have clearances. So there's that kind of pushback too.
You look back at the beginning of the cover-up, why did it happen? Why did it start? Well, if 1947, this gigantic wave of UFOs suddenly appear. You got Kenneth Arnold, you got Roswell, hundreds of sightings all over. We'd just come out of World War II, and our military is faced with a new threat that they really don't know what the hell it is. They start looking at it and try to figure it out, but they can't. So they sort of painted themselves into a corner of secrecy. Nobody wants to admit, if you're a president or chairman of the Joint Chiefs, there's something flying in our atmosphere, and we can't control it. We can't even catch it. We can't detect it on radar. There's not much we can do. They don't want to admit that. Secondly, I think what was told to me by a Senate intelligence guy who was a chief staffer who oversaw black budget operations. He had come out to Area 51 looking into the Lazar stuff years ago, early 90s. And he told me, look, if this is true, if this cover-up is going on, if they are diverting millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars from legitimate national security programs to keep this cover-up going, as he suspected there were, then somebody's going to go to prison. When it comes out, they'd go to prison. I think we heard Dave Grush speaking before this House committee in late July, in which he talked about special access programs, hundreds of millions of dollars being funneled into them. Nothing ever comes out. Congress has no oversight. Congress doesn't even know they exist. That's the kind of thing you could send somebody to prison if and when it comes out. And then the final reason, we can only speculate about it, maybe there really is a big secret. I wonder about it. If I was told, here's the real deal, here's what's going to happen if this comes out, society will collapse. It is so overwhelming, so disturbing that it would hit the fan, that everybody'd freak out. Maybe there is something like that. I don't know. But it gets dangerous for us to allow military folks to decide, I can know it, but you can't. Dad can know, but mom and the kids can't know. I don't like that.
Yeah,
I'd like to be able to know myself.
I don't like it either, but why do they think that society would collapse?
There was a Brookings Institute study that was done in 1960 where they looked at it. And, let's say it was confirmed that we came out and admitted that extraterrestrials are here. And they speculated, in looking at sociological matters, that social institutions would collapse. Do people want to still pay their taxes? Do they want to go to work? It was so overwhelming. The fact that we, a lesser species, have been discovered by something more intelligent. We know from human history how that works out. When the Europeans come to North America, we know what happens to the people who are already here, the less developed society. They collapsed. They were wiped out. And I think that was the projection of that study. The only way to get around that, they said, is to prepare for it over a long period of time, to condition folks to get ready for it. Now, I don't know if there was ever a policy where they instituted that, but it kind of looks like it. All the UFO and alien movies and TV shows and X-Files this and books and reports and children's cartoons, it almost looks like we've been conditioned to get ready for it over the last 60 years.
When people talk about the possibility of these being some sort of black ops creation by the Defense Department, some sort of weapons grade drone that moves at insane speeds with some unknown technology that they've developed in secrecy, that kind of falls apart when you go back to 47. If you go back to 47 and you're seeing these vehicles that are behaving in a very similar way, or at least described in a very similar way, where they just jet off at insane rates of speed, no visible means of propulsion, no sound. That's the one thing that brings me back. Like, God, they seem to act the same. At least some of them do. They seem to be, and if we're talking about 1947, we can really safely assume that they did not have drone technology capable of, super hypersonic speeds at that time.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is a big part of the issue here. Is like people can just say, "Oh, this is really special projects that are even being hidden by our own government." The thing is, the UFO phenomenon has been ubiquitous. It's been everywhere in the world, and it's been going on before 1947. So somebody had that technology. Now, I do hope we've had some sort of ability to get derivative technologies. I know they've been trying to do that if we believe the core concept that we have craft that's more advanced than ours that we're trying to reverse engineer. So the fact you bring that up, and I want to touch on what you just said, the explanation I've been given, we've both been given, is that there are true national security concerns about this technology, that the cover-up or whatever, that it has to do with what will happen if we make a breakthrough in this technology, and that can be weaponized. So the secrecy, you could say, some people have tried to convince us that there's real, true national security issues with this, in that once you admit one thing, those next questions are going to come. And maybe we can't answer those yet. We don't know. So that's the fear, is like, it's like the Oppenheimer movie. Like, shit's been kept pretty secret, but stuff has come out. It's like, what happens if we admit the fundamental truth that there are craft of unknown origin that are more advanced technologically than ours? Doesn't matter where they're from. What happens if we admit that? So people are concerned, from my opinion, within government, that if they let that out, the follow-up, they're not going to be able to deal with.
This technology has been seen throughout human history, on every continent, in every culture, for as far back as humans have been around. That is not our technology that was flying around pre-1947. Look, Dave Fravor was here in this chair, Joe, talking to you, and he talked about the Tic Tac incident from 2004 as he testified before Congress in late July. We didn't have that technology then to do what the Tic Tac did. We don't have it now. We don't have it. If you look back at the paper trail, this is what got me hooked on this topic in the begin with. I can't go out and find UFOs. I don't know the cosmic meaning of all this stuff, but there is a paper trail within our government, documents, memos, reports that were generated by the Department of Defense before the Freedom of Information Act existed, before they had to worry about the public ever seeing these reports. Those documents paint a pretty clear picture. General Nathan Twining, who became Chief of the Air Force, he was also the first Air Force guy to be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He wrote this document in 1947, the Twining Memo, where he talks about these things are not fictitious or imaginary. They're real, and they're not ours. And we don't think they're the Russians either. It's not our technology. We wish we had it.
Sorry, how did he describe it?
It's not fictitious or imaginary. It's real.
But how did he describe the crafts, or how they behave?
Metallic. They can appear and disappear. We can't detect them on our sensors, whatever, I guess it was radar back then, that they can outfly our best planes, fly circles around us. There's nothing we can do about them. We have no defense mechanism against them. And then there's the paper trail starts there. There was a study by the FBI and the U.S. Army in 1948. Then the CIA, after it was created, got involved. They've been studying this stuff for a long time, and the documents where they speak to each other, very frankly, this is real. It's not us. As the 1960, they put out a memo saying this is serious business. We need to figure this out. I think there are inescapable national security implications for this technology. There is a race for it. We're trying to get it. The Russians are trying to get it. The Chinese are trying to get it. Whoever gets it, they win.
Are there some sort of reports about the Russians and the Chinese also having recovered crafts?
Dude, he smuggled a ton of classified documents out of Russia himself during Glasnost and Perestroika. He went and met with the heads of the UFO programs in Russia during that time period. He came back with all those documents and actually supplied them to some people. Like that happened.
It had a lot to do with Harry Reid's decision to go ahead and support funding, because those documents show that the Russians are trying to do what we're trying to do, which is to take this stuff apart and figure out how it works.
And what year was this?
This is 1993, the first time I went. But their study lasted, they had the biggest study in the history of the world. From 78 to 88, the USSR sent out an order to every military unit in the vast Soviet Empire that any UFO, any orb, any ball of light, anything weird in the sky, all has to be investigated. And that information had to be funneled to the Ministry of Defense, to the desk of a guy named Colonel Boris Sokolov, who was in charge of this program. And I met him, and he shared a lot of that information with me. And he admitted, we're trying to figure this stuff out because if we could duplicate that technology, we could kick your ass in terms of stealth. We could beat you at your own game on stealth technology. So they were trying to do it. They're trying to figure it out. We hear bits and pieces that they have recovered crashes as well. So do the Chinese, maybe the Israelis.
I mean, also in these documents. And can you tell them who you gave them to, that whole stuff? Can you tell them that?
They got into the hands of the U.S. government. And then that was after I came back from Russia the first time. I went back again in 96. A lot of the people who had been willing to talk to me during Glasnost were now afraid. They would not meet with me. The people who had gone on camera changed their tunes because the whole country had changed in that time period. But the documents also went to OSAP. That's the program that the DIA ran. Bigelow was the contractor for it. And they hired a bunch of Russians to go through those documents, figure out the structure of the Russian UFO program, and did a lot more analysis than I could do just by myself.
And in these documents, they talked about shoot-down attempts, which is something that we'll be hearing more about over the next 15 weeks, I hope. So in Russia, they had this policy at first to engage these things, and they lost pilots.
Yeah, they had 40 different incidents during that study where Russian warplanes chased UFOs. 3 of those cases, the UFOs turned around and shot them down. They disabled the planes, and the planes crashed. 2 of those pilots died. And after the 3rd crash, the Russian Ministry of Defense put out the order, leave them alone. Yeah. They may have, quote, incredible capacities for retaliation. Just leave them alone.
And one last thing about that blew my mind. We did an episode about this, like him going to Russia, the whole thing. They talked about in those documents that they knew how many satellites that we had dedicated to looking for UFOs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I met this Russian scientist who had worked on their version of Star Wars. He lived in one of these secret cities. He'd never spoken to any journalist, let alone a Western journalist. And he started telling us about the work that they were doing. He showed me this tabletop model of a laser weapon that he called the weapon of the aliens. But he said he'd been involved in the Russian space program in the earliest days. They had satellites up there that were seeing these things coming in and out of space into Earth's atmosphere and going out. He said, the Americans, I know that you guys had those satellites. You were seeing the same stuff we were. Their intelligence agents got information from the U.S. They knew we were collecting information back then. They know we're collecting it now.
And when they said that they had jets shot down, do we have instances of jets getting shot down in America?
We do. It's kind of sketchy because a lot of those records, we have records of the planes going down, but there's no indication that the UFOs were responsible other than the Captain Mantell incident. It's a pretty famous UFO case where he chased a UFO and then crashed. I think he might have run out of gas. And I think the Air Force tried to explain he was chasing the planet Venus, which is preposterous.
There was analysis done by 2 labs. Obviously, the question is where did that come from? I mean, there is chromium, titanium, and iron, which you can find in ordinary steel, but this isn't really. The composition isn't exactly what you'd expect industrial steel to be. So one of the chemical analyses is done at the lab, for industrial steel. The investigators call the company. The company says, yes, we make steel. So we have furnaces, but we empty the furnaces, this is over a weekend, the factory is closed, there would be nobody there, and certainly no liquid steel in our factory
It's
on
only
that
half
day.
a ton of it.
They have, yeah.
This is a half a ton that
Yeah.
they found sitting there.
So then they call the Strategic Air Command because B-52s fly over that town. B-52 is a big thing, and the people saw something in the sky. So maybe it was the Air Force, politely laughs at them and says, we carry atom bombs, but we don't carry furnaces with molten steel. Okay, so go look somewhere else. And they say, good luck. By the way, this is a way you could test it. This is a way. The Air Force, people think, number one, there is nothing in the Blue Book files worth looking at. That's not true. I spent 4 years. Dr. Hynek had copies of all the files. The files were not classified. There were a few random cases that were classified for other reasons, not because of the UFO, because of where it was or so whatever, that I didn't have access to. I was just a graduate student, or a PhD. Dr. Hynek and I convinced the Air Force to do a computer file of everything they had about UFOs, because before then it was just paper files all over the place. And if they were challenged by Carl Sagan or somebody like that at the time, they wouldn't be able to provide good statistics. So they agreed for me to get the files and punch them into punch cards, take it to a computer, redo the statistics, looking at their explanation and then my explanation for the cases. I did the whole thing, thousands and thousands of cases. They were right that majority were explainable. Okay, what we were looking for were the ones that were not explainable. This one cannot be explained. Okay, and there are enough of those. There are hundreds of those that scientists could have looked at. No, I went through the Air Force base with my French passport. At the time, I wasn't a citizen. You had to wait 5 years before you could apply for American citizenship. So I was working. I had a small contract that was completely, unclassified to recalibrate the statistics of the Blue Book files. So I had access to essentially all the Blue Book files. But I went into the base with a clearance for 3 days with Dr. Hynek to go to the division that was looking at the UFOs and spend those 3 days with Major Quintanilla and his staff going through the files. And they had lots of remains of things and stones and strange metals and so on, which at the end of the project, all that was thrown away. So this is, everything is going on now. This is for you, by the way.
Oh,
this
thank
is
you.
for your special collection of weird things.
Stuff. Yeah.
This is, essentially, it's steel. There we go.
So that's the area where
the mass of
mass
steel
of steel
glowing.
And so this steel you can make on Earth. This is
Yes.
It's a composite of bunch of different materials.
Yeah. It's not exactly the steel that you'd use in construction or but it is essentially steel. And so I gave my samples to to Stanford so that we could redo the analysis, and not the chemical analysis, but the isotope analysis. So Dr. Nolan and I took it to the lab. Dr. Nolan had 2 series of instruments that could do the analysis. We did both, and we confirmed essentially this. So there was no special change in the isotope ratios. If there was, that would indicate that somebody had manipulated the isotopes, which is not a hoax. Then you know for sure it's not a hoax, because that's high caliber scientific laboratory work, and you need special instrument experts to interpret it.
Right, but that wasn't the case, right?
No.
So
No,
the
it's normal.
isotopes hadn't been manipulated. Have they found, because I've heard this about Gary Nolan in particular, that they do have samples of things that they can't explain?
So I gave him essentially all my samples, all the ones that I could relate to reliable cases, because I don't want to give him junk.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of junk floating around that people think is strange, and so yes, we're going through all those, and the idea is to publish it as we go. To publish everything as we go. There are some that give the indication of being, but as always in science, we have to be careful. Our colleagues will say, very good, congratulations, you did that with one instrument. Now you should redo it with a different lab, with a different machine, and see what they find.
Right.
Because Dr. Nolan has, some of those machines are machines that he's invented at Stanford, okay? But they are tied to biology. I mean, this is not a biology. This is steel, okay?
Right.
And this is iron or copper or whatever. So we have to redo it with a different. So in this case, we have redone it with a different line of machines. There is a French machine that cost something like $6 million that would fill half of this room. That's extremely good for testing for isotopes, but only on 4 different elements. With the other machine, the biological machine, we get the whole spectrum. So except for some of the extreme elements, like radioactive elements and so on. So
what samples have they found that have been the most compelling?
We're still working on that, But this paper is important, even though we didn't find something out of range. But that's, in a way, that's validation of what you have to do when somebody presents you with that kind of sample. Those are the steps. This is where the science is today. This is what the technology can tell you, okay? So this is sort of a stake in the ground, even though we didn't find E.T., okay?
Right.
But we didn't find E.T. science.
We found physical evidence of something.
But we've got the technology now. We know how to do it, One problem we had was that neither one of us is, an expert in materials. We're not experts in steel. So the people who, this was reviewed by, people who were materials experts.
Right.
And they came back with a whole page of questions. Why didn't you look at this? Why didn't you measure that? So Dr. Nolan and the team had to redo about a year of work before they would accept the paper. So that's what you have to go through before scientists will look at it.
Right.
Okay. But this one, is in the literature, in the scientific literature. It's not in some UFO magazine in New Mexico. Okay. And we have the methodology, we can apply it to the others. There are some that we've done with one machine where there are indications. Now, at Stanford, it's funny because you've had 3 generations of people, at Stanford looking at this. Before Dr. Nolan, I was there and I was gathering data and I was using the computer to do statistics and so on. And I worked for Professor Sturak, who unfortunately died a few months ago at over 100. But he was still working in astrophysics, and I was on his astrophysics staff for a couple of years, looking at galaxies, looking at the structure of the sun, and looking at certain types of strange stars that had special emissions and so on. So I was his computer guy, and we also looked at UFO materials, especially a case from Brazil, which he published, and he got financial support to do the isotope analysis, and some of it was arguably different. So we want to redo it. When he donated all his materials to me, when he retired. So I have all that, and I passed it to Dr. Nolan. So Stanford now is acquiring a reputation as being a UFO analysis place.
Yeah, for sure.
But it went from essentially solar physics and very high energy physics, that I was working on with Dr. Sturrock, to me with the computing center, and now with Dr. Nolan in the medical school. So we've had, they are
well, I'm glad
in trouble.
They're willing to do that. I had heard that there was some alloy that was very difficult to comprehend that someone would be able to construct, that it would cost billions of dollars to make this particular type of alloy, that they had discovered something along those lines.
Well, I've seen those books. I've heard those things on the internet.
Yeah.
The question is, scientists will want to look at this. They'll want to know, well, how did you do it? How did you prepare the sample?
Right.
We were given access to a sample that in fact is very strange, and it has different colors on it. It fits in the palm of your hand, so it's a significant size. Remember, Dr. Nolan is looking at individual human cells, with his device, okay? So, anything more than 10 grams, we don't need. I mean, we can work with very little material. Although, of course, we want to do different things with different parts of it.
Right.
But this thing had some very interesting incrustation of a red deposit. And all the people who had looked at it, including some official labs and some, signed a disclaimer saying they would not scrape off the interesting deposits that were on it. Well, all of them did, I mean, after signing the thing. By the time it came to me, most of the interesting red stuff had been scraped off. So I don't know what they did. And I don't know what machine they used, and they didn't publish a paper. It took us 4 years to publish this paper, okay? And the paper came from Stanford with, PhDs, 4 PhDs writing it. So that's, the bar is pretty high if you're going to actually publish this in an international review.
Yeah, and with an interesting title,
so
too.
We'll do others. That's the plan.
If people want to find this, it says improve instrumental techniques, including isotope analysis, applicable to the characterization of unusual materials with potential relevance to aerospace forensics.
Yeah, he doesn't talk about UFOs.
There it is. That's a very tricky way.
Well,
relevance to aerospace forensics.
Yeah, people read between the lines.
Yeah,
and
that's.
say,
What do you mean aerospace? Who's aerospace stuff? This is the question: if these encounters happened, if this egg-shaped craft was real, and if these small people-like things that breathe air did communicate with people, where are they from? Is this something that has always been here? Is this something that visits here? Is it something that is here?
So in the BASS project of Mr. Bigelow that was funded by the Defense Intelligence Agency, we had a template of things that the Pentagon wanted to have. And it said, trajectory, composition, luminosity, radiation, and so on. Okay. Well, yeah, those are the things that you'd need if you were looking at a Russian aircraft, or you were looking at, the Nimitz thing, whatever it was. But, is that really relevant? I mean, in science, you don't start from the conclusions. You're going to look at this, and this is not something you've seen before, and you go on from that. In the Nimitz case, we've all seen those photographs, and they are, I've stopped counting how many papers there are from the New York Times on down with the picture of the photograph of that the F-18 was taking, the pilot took from the thing. Well, nobody mentions that this isn't a photograph. People think it's a photograph. So in the file, there is a memo from the folks at Raytheon. Raytheon makes the device, which is a big, a big thing that you hang under the wing of an F-18 that's going to take these images. It's an image. It's not a photograph. It's looking into the infrared. It's not looking at the details. If there is a number painted on the thing, it's not going to see it. It's looking at the heat. So when this was published by the New York Times, there was a very interesting memo with a little touch of humor from Raytheon to the Navy, saying, you know those things you've published, and it was taken with one of the devices that we sold you to put under the wing of your aircraft. It's not a camera, it's not a photographic camera. You gave us specifications for what you wanted us to build, and that's what we gave you. You wanted something that could measure the temperature of the exhaust of an enemy aircraft that you're going to shoot down. The F-18 goes behind that Russian thing, or MiG or whatever, and the camera is painting the exhaust from the Russian guy, okay? So that you can distinguish between, American Airlines 723 and a MiG.
Right.
Okay, that's going to help you discriminate what kind of enemy you've got. Is it friend or foe first? If it's friend, you peel off, and that's fine. If it's an enemy, you're going to engage the guy. Okay, that's what we gave you. You didn't tell us you wanted a device to track flying saucers, because we don't know what flying saucers are. If you do, we'll build one. And that memo is just so funny. It's an official. I make it a little bit funnier than it was, but it's an official memo, and it's very straightforward.
Jamie, see if you could find a good photograph, an image of the infrared image that was taken by those F-18s.
You have an image of a heat source.
Yes, of that Tic Tac. And then they also got the video representation, the video of the thing taking off at some extreme rate of speed. That's it right there. So that's the image, right?
Yeah. Well, the radar said that the radar said that it took off and popped up somewhere else, and so we accept that at face value because it's in the New York Times, and that may be true. In my work in venture capital, I've looked at all kinds of technology that's around, and so I go to technology meetings. Those are open; they are not secret or anything. And people talk about their gadget or their device. They are looking for many to make in larger quantity. So I found myself in a conversation with a guy from one of the aircraft companies in Southern California, and I asked him, there is a device that has a funny name, like Dispro or something like that, and it measures it acquires radar signals. I think it's a DSPR, for radar, and that gadget, I had never heard of it, and it's actually not classified. Now, it was developed initially so that you could analyze radar data that was coming to you. If somebody was painting your aircraft on a radar, you could detect the characteristics of the radar pulse. Why would you want to do that? Well, you want to do that because, I said, well, what does it look like? Is it classified? He said, no, it's not classified. Many airplanes, civilian airplanes can carry it. You put it in the nose of your Piper Cub or whatever, and you fly around Los Angeles, and it will acquire the characteristics of all the radars in the Los Angeles area digitally. It's a digital thing. It's a computer, essentially, that acquires radar data, and then it feeds back radar characteristics of any aircraft you want somewhere else. So if you want your Piper Cub to look like a B-52 20 miles away, you turn on, I'm making it simple, but you program the thing, and you can redirect the air defense, for example, to another place.
So you can send a signal to another place that makes it look like there's a B-52 there.
Yes. Or make it look like you've disappeared in midair and reappeared somewhere else.
Oh.
Digitally. It's a digital radar feedback device that once you know the characteristics of the radars that are painting you can, obviously, suppose you want to travel to Moscow over the Iron Curtain without being shot down by the Soviet Air Force, you'd want to redirect all the radars. So, you're on 20 radars.
Right. One of the things that they said about the Tic Tac was that when they encountered it, it was somehow or another blocking their detection signals.
Well, I don't know this DERPROM. I don't know how far it's gotten in the last 30 years.
Right.
The guy I was talking to was telling me about technology of 30 years ago.
Wow.
That blew my mind. I didn't know you could do that.
Right. I didn't know until just now.
You could just paint. So that's, I'm not sure where the technology is and who is cleared for that. Pilots are cleared for certain things, obviously for all their equipment on board. Mm-hmm. They are not necessarily cleared for... So you have to ask, in the case of a Nimitz, what clearances did these pilots we see on TV, what clearances did they have? Did they have the electronic countermeasure clearance? They don't necessarily have it. Some of them didn't have the camera. Some of those who are on TV today talking about these images, the image didn't come from them. It came from one of their buddies,
right?
Who came afterwards.
There's also the question of
and so half
where
of the
they
data
take
is
place.
missing.
I've always questioned where they take place, because they take place in the same areas where the United States always runs military training exercises. They take place off of San Diego, off of the East Coast, all these areas where we know that they run exercises all the time, restricted airspace. If you were going to test equipment,
I think this was in international waters.
Yes. Yeah, it was. But it was still off the coast of San Diego where they do these things, which is why the fighter pilots were there in the first place.
But it's not restricted. I mean, the Russians could fly there.
Right, not that area, but isn't the area off the East Coast where some of those things restricted?
I don't know.
Okay.
The one around Long Island
China's
Long Island is restricted.
It says China's electronic war gadget turns small drones into flying stadium on radar.
So this is an article from January of this year, and then I'll show you something else I found from in here.
Wow, so they can make it look like a flying
The
saucer.
size of an iPad can make it look like as big as a sports stadium.
Whoa, look at this. The effect, similar to a giant flying saucer suddenly materializing in midair, would be reminiscent of a scene from a science fiction film, but is achievable according to a peer-reviewed paper published on January 8th. Whoa.
So then the month before that, here's their new stealth fighter that's painted with the stuff he just said that scatters the frequencies or something.
This isn't my field.
Cool
this is just something I stumbled across typing in the words he was saying.
Yeah, just pretty cool.